So welcome back. This is a second one of our presentations this evening, and this one is almost Dr. Kerry Graf. She will be very soon. And she has participated in our post-professional program and focused on school-based practice, trauma, and autism. And so we're very excited to have Kerry share her insights and her capstone work with us this evening. So take it away, Kerry.
Yeah, hi. I'm Kerry Graf, and as part of my capstone research, I have researched the adult impact on co-regulation of kindergarten students in elementary school. So, being a school-based therapist for the past 10 years and working in the schools, I've seen a need for regulation in kindergarten students. There seems to be a lot of dysregulation in kindergarten students. And so I wanted to look into that and have identified that area to research. Just I just want to start off with the fact that kindergarten classrooms are complex environments. And just in today's day and age, there has been students have lived through COVID, students with diagnosis of autism or intellectual and developmental delays. Student dysregulation is common in the kindergarten classrooms. Teachers, as a school-based therapist, I often have teachers reach out to me for consult, OT consult, or questions about sensory processing needs for kindergarten students. And one of the problems also is when students are dysregulated in kindergarten, it often takes a long time before finding strategies that work for them. So kids come into kindergarten and it's not like right away we're able to figure out what strategies to use for them. It takes a long time. And often by the time kids enter first grade, it seems like they have those strategies in place already. So, in my literature review, one of the first questions I asked is how does self-regulation develop and what is the typical timeline for self-regulation? And so, it was hard finding a lot of information about the development of self-regulation. But I've pieced together information about regulation beginning in utero with rhythmic activity from the mother in terms of breathing and heart rate, movement, vibration. Then once babies are born, the newborn regulates through others with co-regulation. And so, meeting once the child's needs are met, they begin to develop self-soothing skills, and that's kind of like the beginning of regulation. Then at age 3 to 5, emotional regulation skills begin to emerge. And children develop regulation before behavioral regulation, and children develop inhibitory control before executive skills. And then between the ages of 3 and 7, children have a rapid growth rate in executive function skills. And some of the factors that influence self-regulation are executive functioning, sensory processing, environmental factors, gender. They've actually found that girls are more likely to develop self-regulation skills earlier than boys. Language acquisition, if students or children who have better language skills tend to have better self-regulation skills. And also, the higher the mother's education level, the earlier the students develop self-regulation skills, which is an interesting fact. And then stress tends to have a negative impact on self-regulation, and also developmental age is another factor. One of the other questions I asked in the literature review is what is co-regulation? And I love the quote by Lori DeSaltis that says, emotions are always contagious. And co-regulation is just one person helping to support another person's regulation. And so some of that is done through mirroring behavior or modeling, connecting through a safety or a safe environment. And co-regulation is necessary necessary in the development of self-regulation skills. Another question that I asked is, what do we know about self-regulation in the classroom? And self-regulation has shown to be strong behavior regulation in preschool is a predictor of academic achievement. So students who have better self-regulation skills tend to do better academically in the classroom. And that 20% of children, I'm sorry here, 20% of children do not demonstrate growth of behavioral self-regulation skills until age 5. So children entering kindergarten are 5 or 6 years old. So 20% of those children may not even have the developmental skills to be able to self-regulate yet. And then also teachers have little understanding of sensory processing and the strategies to help, you know, improve regulation. So how can we foster co-regulation in schools? One of the first things is self-awareness, and in ourselves and our own regulation, understanding a child's perceived sense of safety, looking at the power differentials that exist, being aware of the triggers, having a knowledge of students and their identities. That can also include a background of trauma or a neurodiverse diagnosis. And also providing students with context, choice, and connection can help foster co-regulation. There are different ways to improve regulation in students, and those are through top-down and bottom-up approaches. And by creating a safe environment, modeling regulation, improving emotional regulation, teaching interoception, sensory integration, and sensory strategies, improving executive functioning skills, and cognitive strategies. One of the quotes that was really impactful for me in my review of literature was just that a dysregulated adult can never regulate a dysregulated child. And then this takes me into my research question, which starts with the adult. Are adults working with and engaged with children in the elementary school setting regulated throughout the day to model co-regulation skills to kindergarten students? And does their regulation impact the regulation of students? So the purpose of the capstone was to determine if the adults working with kindergarten students are regulated throughout the day and to determine if the adults regulation impacts the student regulation. And I used a qualitative method called participatory action research, which included a focus group design. And in this type of research, the researcher works in partnership with the participants, and there's a 4-part continuous cycle, which includes the phases of reflection, planning, acting, and observing. So the research was done at a suburban Pennsylvania elementary school. I was able to get the Institutional Review Board approval through Elizabethtown College. Site consents were obtained not only from the school itself, but also through the contract therapy company that I work with. All adults working with kindergarten students at that school were invited to participate. However, only 4 people actually participated in the focus group, and 3 of those participants were kindergarten teachers. And I'm very thankful because that is all the kindergarten students at the school. So all of the kindergarten students kindergarten teachers participated, not students. And then one of the teachers was a learning support teacher. So I had 4 participants. They signed consents. And then I had originally planned to have 5 meetings, 2 in September, 2 in October, and 1 in November. But only 4 meetings actually took place because the first scheduled meeting had no participants show up. So I was happy during the subsequent meetings that we did have participants. And also we ensured student confidentiality in our meetings. The way that I collected data is I used a talk-to-text application with Otter AI. And also I used a voice memo app on my phone. And I generated transcripts using these 2 applications. So in the first focus group meeting that I had, there were 3 participants, and the plan was to find out, are the students in the kindergarten classes experiencing dysregulation, and what is the participant knowledge of co-regulation? All of the adults stated that they did not know what co-regulation was. Although once it was explained to them, the adults said that they were using co-regulation strategies. They didn't have a name for it. They didn't know what it was called. And they also estimated that about 14% of the students in their classes are regularly dysregulated. And they gave student examples of dysregulation. And the action was that participants were given information on the development of self-regulation, co-regulation, and factors that influence self-regulation. And the reflection from this meeting was the meeting was energizing and encouraging. And I feel like everybody enjoyed the meeting, and we were all I was especially looking forward to the next meeting. But some of the examples of dysregulation in students that were given was that students might randomly start crying, have a temper tantrum, they can't soothe themselves, ability not to control body, parkour on the carpet, very bouncy, can't bring it back, rocking, turning the opposite way, crying when not wanting to do a task, and crying when something's not a big problem. And one of the teachers said, quoted, "When I have a kid crying, I want to cry too." So I thought this was a great example of co-regulation. And in the second focus group, we had 2 participants, and the plan was to understand the participant knowledge of self-regulation. Oh, I do want to back up and say 2 participants came to the second focus group. However, one of those participants was new to the focus groups and did not come to the first focus group. So that was the fourth participant. And then also to continue this discussion about factors that influence regulation. So the fourth participant did have a knowledge of self-regulation and co-regulation, but didn't really know about the development of self-regulation. And also another observation was that students' regulation may be dysregulating for adults and other students. So we talked about how the way that one student may regulate themselves might not be regulating for other people. And the action was we discussed ways to stay regulated throughout the day. And participants verbalized frustration and suggested a decision tree or flow chart to address regulation in students. So one of the things that the participants said is sometimes I feel like I'm just throwing mud at the wall and seeing what sticks with every kid. It eventually works. It's just that I don't know that I'm doing it the best way. So the teachers were frustrated, feeling like they were using a lot of trial and error techniques to find strategies that worked with children, and didn't really know kind of a way to approach this dysregulation, I guess, in a more sequential manner. And the feedback was able to be used to plan for the next meeting. Ways that adults and students stay regulated, that were discussed in the focus group meetings, are listed here for adult regulation and student regulation. And then the third focus group had 3 participants. And the plan was to provide participants with a decision tree for addressing regulation and providing bottom-up and top-down strategies. The action was that participants were shown a PowerPoint presentation. So I made up a PowerPoint presentation with different information for education for them in terms of the development of self-regulation. And we reviewed the development of executive function and discussed the hierarchy of the brain with top-down and bottom-up approaches to regulation. And so over here is a visual from the PowerPoint on executive function and how the skills build from the Center on the Developing Child. And as you can see here, from ages 3 to 6, there's a very large increase in the development of executive function. I'm sorry, did I say self-regulation? There's a big increase from 3 to 6 years old in executive function skills. So if you look at children between 5 and 6 years old, they're at the top of that curve here. But there's also a lot of students, maybe because of their developmental age or intellectual and developmental disabilities or neurodiversity, that they're down lower here on this curve and are really having a hard time regulating in the classroom. Some observations were that participants noted that they do not always use the best strategy for the child. Instead, they jump levels on the hierarchy, which I'll show you on the next slide. Participants also noted observing trauma responses in students, but the student didn't have a history of trauma. It's hard to know if a student does have a history of trauma, and sometimes we're not always aware of that. And also it was noted that some older students have not yet developed these skills for self-regulating or executive function. And the visual representation was impactful for the teachers. Okay, this is some of the slides that I showed the participants for the PowerPoint presentation that I gave them. And this is Bruce Perry's neurosequential model here of the brain, looking at the hierarchy with the brain stem down here being the fight, flight, and freeze response, and also the stress response is happening here at the brain stem. And at the cortical level is where the executive function is. And also the sequence of engagement where at the brainstem is the regulation and the limbic system is the relational sense and the cortex is the reasoning. And this is where the teachers were saying that sometimes they'll see a student at the brainstem level where they're trying to give them a cortical strategy and it's not working. So the teachers responded with they would jump levels sometimes, and they're just being more aware of what level to reach the child at. And then what I did is, since they asked for a decision-making tree for student regulation, I came up with this for them. And the first step is to notice the student behavior. And then we are looking at two different things. Is the child working from the executive function part of their brain, or are they using a sensory response? And so I just added some questions here for the teachers to be able to look through and see, notice what the children's response was. But if the child's working from the executive function part of their brain, then you could use a top-down approach or a cortical strategy. And if they're working from the sensory part of their brain, then a bottom-up approach is needed and sensory strategies should be used. So the fourth focus group, we had 3 participants, and the plan was just to gain knowledge of the participants' understanding of co-regulation, their use of co-regulation, and how they're staying regulated, and further discussion on sensory and cortical strategies. The observations were that participants agreed that adult regulation impacts student regulation. They also noticed the use of co-regulation in the classroom and were able to give examples. So now the participants not only knew about co-regulation, but they're able to discuss it and give examples and say when it's working and not in their classrooms. They also noticed that other students in the classroom both support and disrupt the dysregulation of other students. And the P1, which is a participant number 1, noted that she learned students may not be demonstrating behaviors due to misbehaving, but may be overwhelmed with their sensory needs. And I think that was very important. That was great that she had said that and shared that. And the action was that participants are emailed a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, and we all agreed that the focus group was very beneficial and provided lots of opportunities for learning. And so these are just some of the cortical strategies I shared with the participants, and we went over different sensory strategies as well. And then the participants definitely needed to implement co-regulation and self-regulation strategies for themselves throughout the day. In order to stay regulated, I feel like regulation is not like a static thing, but it's constantly shifting. Also, they noted that students' behavior can be from sensory dysregulation and not from misbehaving. And participants noted that they jumped levels and don't always provide students with the proper approach. They were given a decision tree, and current research is limited on co-regulation in kindergarten classrooms and with kindergarten students. And the importance of therapist and teacher collaboration is an important aspect of meeting the student needs. Some of the limitations for this research was the focus group size. Not all adults working with the kindergarten students were represented. It was only the kindergarten teachers and 1 learning support teacher. So none of the other related services or the aides or anybody else working with the kindergarten students were represented. We had a limited number of focus groups. Not all the participants attended all the meetings. The meeting length was limited. It was only at 1 elementary school, and it didn't include all the other grade levels and anybody else working with students who might have a student who has needs in this area. And also, it was the school that I'm a contract therapist at, so our relationship may have biased the meetings as well. Some of the next steps is that the PowerPoint slides were emailed to the participants. I was able to meet with my supervisor from the contract company where I work. And we did talk about me being able to share this information, maybe through a continuing education course that goes to therapists throughout their contract company. There's also a potential to expand educational opportunities within the elementary school and school district. I did reach out to the principal, but haven't been able to meet with him yet. So I'm hoping to have that meeting and talk about that. And then also, I responded to a call for papers through Columbia University, and I'm going to be presenting this information in January at the 2025 Dr. Janet Falk Kessler Day. And then, in conclusion, teachers expressed that adult regulation does have an impact on the regulation of kindergarten students, and students also have an impact on the regulation of adults. Peers have an impact on the regulation of kindergarten students, both positive and negatively. And co-regulation is a necessary aspect of regulation for kindergarten students. And adults and students require a variety of strategies to stay regulated. And I just made this little diagram over here with the adult, student, and other students. And I feel like the areas that they overlap is how their co-regulation impacts each other. And these are my references. And I just want to say thank you, especially to Dr. Humbert, who was so encouraging to me. And I always heard her little voice to keep going in the back of my mind. And Dr. Carrie Hample and Elizabethtown College for all the information and the courses that I was able to take. My husband, children, and family who encouraged me even when I didn't think I could do this, my work, and also to those amazing kindergarten students who constantly surprise me and make me laugh. So that is everything.
So I'll open it up for questions for anyone who might have them. You can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can put them in the chat bar and I'll follow. I'll start by saying you did a phenomenal job. So nice job, Carrie. Um, any thoughts on why it was maybe tricky to get more participants?
Well, I did have one of the teachers tell me that the aides wouldn't come unless it was a paid thing.
Mm,
So that was maybe one thing. Since it wasn't a paid, it was a voluntary um, focus group. And then I'm not really sure why I wasn't able to get any other participants, but I feel like I'm thankful that the kindergarten teachers all came
yeah,
because that was very impactful, I think, for them. So, yeah,
it's always hard to be a contracted therapist too, I think.
yeah.
Yeah. Questions?
So, Carrie, I have a question. Carrie and Carrie. So, Carrie, great job. You did a wonderful job with this and the project. And again, I don't think we ever discussed this, but it popped up in my head when you were going over your presentation. So you spoke about the kindergarten students dysregulating other students, or they're trying to regulate themselves, and it's just like I consider it like a domino effect, right? So, did you have any examples of that from your participants? What that might look like?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the participants said that there was one student who was just really crying for a really long time, and she had to take him outside of the room. But she said then the other, she's trying to get the other students to go back to work, and it was almost like they can still hear the other student crying. And she's like, he's not here anymore. You can't hear him. And it's almost like it was like a ringing in their ears is what it was. It just takes them a while to get back, regulated themselves even after another student is dysregulated.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions? I'll ask one more. Carrie, what was the thing that surprised you the most in this whole process?
That's a good question.
Mhm.
Um, I guess what surprised me is just that the teachers were frustrated that they felt like they didn't, there was a lot of trial and error. They didn't really have any strategies. So,
Yeah,
Can, can I ask another question? Because I don't remember this, Carrie, but
yeah.
remind me or remind us or tell us about the years of experience. Do you remember that, or did you ask that? Like how long they were teachers?
yes. So, I'm not sure the exact years of experience, but one of the kindergarten teachers was a learning support teacher before, and then she shifted to be a kindergarten teacher. So I would say two of them probably have at least 5 years, and the other one maybe 3 to 5 years. They're all relatively younger
Hmm.
than me. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you wonder about their education and their background.
Yeah,
And
yes,
Hmm.
yeah.
and
So those were the kindergarten teachers, but the learning support teacher did seem to have more background in trauma-informed care.
Mm.
And I do think previously she had been an emotional support teacher at a different school.
that makes sense.
Mhm. But she was the one that asked for a decision tree too. So just, um, yeah.
Yeah. I think you had an amazing project. Congratulations, you did a great job.
Thank
So
you.
I'm going to stop the recording. It'll be available soon.